Welcome to 2020 Election Judge Training for Clay County. For 2020, our election calendar looks like our primary election is August 11th, 2020, and your material pickups will be that Friday, August 7th from 8 to 4:30. Saturday, we are open from 10 to 3, and Monday, August 10th from 8 to 5. For the general election, our election will be November 3rd, and then material pickups will be Friday, October 30th from 8 to 4:30, Saturday from 31st, Halloween, from 10 to 3, and then Monday, November 2nd from 8 to 5. What we're going to be going over today in our agenda is our polling place conduct, safety of our election judges, safety of our voters, polling place challenges, closing polls, challengers, and head judges. Code of conduct. Access. Can all voters, different physicalities and abilities move about the polling place? Set up the room, reduce bottlenecks in the waiting line, try to maintain social distancing. Privacy. Arrange the waiting line and voting stations with social distancing in mind, including the ballot marker. The election judge oath. Each of you will be getting an election judge oath that you sign on election day that states, I solemnly swear or affirm that I will perform the duties of election judge according to the law and the best of my ability, and will diligently endeavor to prevent fraud, deceit, and abuse in conducting this election. I will perform my duties in a fair and impartial manner and not attempt to create any advantage for my party or my candidate. With COVID-19, it's become a concern, and so we are trying our best to make sure that our voters and our staff, election judges and other staff, are maintaining a healthy environment for everyone. For safety for election judges, we are going to make hand sanitizer will be available for all election judges, and masks will be provided, or if you choose, you can bring your own. Now, voter safety, hand sanitizer will be in multiple stations throughout the voting location. Masks will not be provided and will not be required. Please do not turn a voter away if they are not wearing those safety devices. The agenda. So today we're going to also be going over preparing your polling place, preparing for election day, election judge duties, greeter judge, roster and registration judge, your demonstration and ballot judge, and things to consider. Some of these will be slightly different with that we are trying to keep in mind with the COVID-19, the social distancing, and to try and maneuver and make things as safe and efficient as possible. Election day logistics, you're going to want to make sure you're dressed comfortably. Do not wear political or any campaign material. Make sure you bring food for you. It's going to be a long day. Bring snacks, any kind of lunch, paper bag, food. Remember to vote. We are opening absentee ballots up in the next couple weeks, so make sure you fill out your absentee application. Plan ahead for any care of pets or loved ones, daycare, your ride home, any kind of transportation. If you need time off from work, notify your employer in writing for 20 days in advance. Provide your appointment letter. Employer can reduce wages by amount paid, and you can choose to take vacation day if you prefer. Okay, setting up your polling places. It's going to be, like I said, with the COVID-19, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to keep that in mind. Election judges are going to be stationed 6 feet apart, including roster judges. Make sure all your voting booths are 6 feet apart, your markers, and all your voters. We're going to try and set up different identification, like the 6 feet apart marking, like either putting an X or something like that on the floor. Your election greeter judge will probably be a little bit more involved. We are going to be doing strictly paper for sure for the primary election in August. We are looking to proceed to do that in November, depending on where we're at with the pandemic at that point. If we do choose to go for the City of Moorhead and Dilworth, if we do choose to use poll books, we will do another video training for poll books if that does materialize. If multiple rosters and voter registration stations at tables, to make sure that keeps that 6 feet apart. So we're going to split those rosters up into different alphabetical, like A through D. So each station will have their own little alphabet, and then those stations will be 6 feet apart. I would recommend that each station just do their own new registrations and roster registrations all at one station so that you don't have as many people shifting over different areas to try and contain the movement. The greeter judge will give each voter their own pen. We're going to try and each pen will be returned at the voter sticker station. Do not recycle pens. So the greeter judge is going to hand everyone a pen, and they will take that. They will use the same pen at the registration table. They'll mark their ballot with that pen, and then they'll return it once they've deposited their ballot in the ballot machine. Access to voters, again, make sure that even though we have the COVID-19 as a concern, that make sure that it's still being maintained for any physical abilities that could be used. Additional setup tasks, again, make sure you're doing your auto mark, stable flat surface for completing forms, chairs for those who are waiting. If possible, at least one voting booth with wheelchair accessibility, which is usually your auto mark station. Designate disability parking spaces, mark routes into accessible access. Marking waiting line would put tape down, greeter to control the flow for social distancing, and post your flag at your entrance. Greeter judge roles. So each greeter judge is kind of going to be a big role again this time around. Unlike the PNP, the greeter judge is going to be a little bit more involved. Your greeter judge is going to welcome the voters, give each voter a pen, and inform them that this pen will be used for the whole process so that they don't drop them. Make sure voter is properly in the proper voting location. You'll have a greeter list, so if they want to check to make sure that they are on the roster, you can go ahead and use that. Control flow and maintain social distancing, and refer voters to sample ballots. We will have sample ballots just like any other election, and we can post those at the polling locations so that people can make this process a little bit smoother. Your roster and registration judge. Like I was informing before, we are only going to be strictly using paper as of now for August and potentially for the November election. A voter asks for their name and address, and then once check the roster for notations, point to the oath and have them sign, and give their voter receipt and direct them to the ballot station. Note if your precinct contains more than one school district, note the correct school district on the receipt. Now, that doesn't apply for the August election. There is no split school districts for any primary. All you have to do for the primary is make sure that they are in the proper polling location, and then everybody will have the same voter receipt. I'm going to note on here that if for some reason the roster notations, I will go over them a little bit later, if you need to assist your roster or voter, make sure that there's 2 judges at the time. Roster tips. The roster is a legal document that indicates voter has received and cast a ballot. Keep the roster free of unnecessary handwriting. Avoid using an X to identify the person that should be providing their signature. Use a roster correction form if you have any corrections. Make sure that you don't mark any corrections on the roster or mark up the roster in any form, because once the documents come back to the county processes quite a few rosters at a time. We're on a limited time restraint. If you mark that roster and we misinterpret that as a signature, because some voters with limited writing ability will mark with an X. So for us, we would count it as a signature. We potentially would be giving voter history to someone that didn't vote. And we'll throw counts off later in the evening. So it's just best if you have any corrections. And then if you make corrections on the addresses on the left or date of birth, if you correct those on the rosters, I may not see them because I'm only there to look for signatures to post voting history. So those corrections will get missed and not be made. Common roster notations that you may see: AB for absentee, CID, challenge for a postal return, challenge voted out of precinct, challenge felony, and challenge guardianship. So this is kind of what they would look like on the roster. They're in the signature area, and it states the different challenges are right above where they would sign. Roster challenge procedures. If You do have one of those notations. Please make sure you follow the roster challenge procedures. It is, you have the voters swear and affirm their oath, ask the appropriate question to determine if they are eligible. For example, if it's a felony, the state of Minnesota has the rule with the state felony must be classified as off paper. And what that means is that their whole sentence has been completed. Their probation, their parole, any time of treatment, anything that would cause them to still have any affiliation with a officer of the court. Usually now, probation officers have gotten so much better with this that they will literally sign off on a release, and that'll let them know that their voter rights will be restored. But if they are unsure, I would recommend that they check with their probation officer to confirm that they are eligible to vote. This is only for felonies. If there are misdemeanors or below, then they are good to go. But a felony needs to be classified as off paper. If they are a felon and they claim that they are completely done with their information, then you can cross off. I would note it on the incident log that this has occurred so that I know that you went through the process with them. And then I would always recommend that you have a head judge handle that type of situation. If it's a CID or address change, you can handle those on your own. But if it's something that's out of your comfort zone, I would just get a head election judge to handle it for you. If they claim that they're eligible to vote, it's not your job to determine. If they claim they are and they're willing to sign the oath, then go ahead and have them sign the oath and cross out the challenge at the top of their signature line and have them sign. There again, make sure everything, however you dealt with the situation, is in the incident log so that I know how you handled it. If they're eligible, the voter can turn around and vote and make a note of the incident log. If a voter does get turned away and if they choose not to even deal with it or choose not to vote, that is something I also need to know, because I would prefer that would actually warrant a phone call to our office if they are questioning. But either way, if they choose just to leave, make sure that's an incident on your incident log as well, is with the name of the party if you do know. Go to registration table. If submitted to registration less than 20 days before an election, has not voted in the last 4 years, on roster but the legal name has changed, like due to a marriage or a divorce, change address within a precinct. For submitted to registration 21 days prior to each election, the county stops taking pre-registration. What it is that we just don't have time in that 21-day period to verify the information through our DMV and mail out a notice to the voter to confirm their address. But we are connected to the Postal Service, and we are connected to the Department of Corrections, the driver's license, all through the system. So it kind of goes through a process behind the scenes where it confirms the information that they gave us. Once that is the data is confirmed, then we go ahead and mail out a notice to the voter confirming their address, to make sure we don't have any typos or that type of thing. 20 days before, anything that's done after that, we would send out a late registration notice, which is just a paper and it states late registration, and that counts as the information that can be used as your registration option, which I'll go over in a little bit. If they haven't voted in the last 4 years, a lot of times, and even within that 4-year window, if for some reason the system doesn't feel that we're missing a piece of information when they register to vote, our requirements have changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. For some reason, if our system doesn't know, if we're missing a driver's license number, or for some reason our system, you haven't voted, so then we want to confirm that our information is still current and correct. So a lot of times, if you haven't voted in a couple of cycles, it'll drop you off just to inactivate that voter, so that we make sure, have them fill out a new voter registration, make sure our data is current and correct. On roster, the legal name has changed again. If their last name has changed due to a divorce, adoption, marriage, that type of thing, they do need to give us that correct, updated information. And then change within the precinct. If someone changed, we've had it so many times where out in the rural areas, I moved they built it down a couple miles away from their original house, or their parents live and then they move up when they build when they move out, or a lot of our students, they tend to swap roommates or change apartment numbers. All those require a new registration. Registration tips. So, using a precinct finder to verify the voter is in the right place. Confirm the voter has not already voted absentee. Complete registration application, and confirm proof of residence and eligibility. So this slide basically gives you a picture of what our voter registrations look like from the front. They have to confirm the bottom. If you notice, the first question is that are they a U.S. citizen? Are they over 18 on election day? A resident of Minnesota for not a specific precinct for 20 days. Finish with all parts of the felony sentence, like I went over, make sure they're off paper. A person can vote while under guardianship unless judge specifically has revoked. A power of attorney cannot sign for a voter on this situation. Power of attorneys don't have the right to sign off on a voter. If they are there with the voter and the voter could just mark with an X. That tends to happen more absentee versus regular voting, but it does happen. A person cannot vote if a court has ruled that they are legally incompetent. Again, that is not up for you to decide. If someone challenges that, then that would be a form that they would fill out. Basically, my only thing is on the voter registration, please make sure that these are legible, because now that we're going back to paper for this election, make sure that you can read it. If you can't read it and you have the parties in front of you, ask them, how do you spell your last name, or how do you spell your first name? Also, make sure the date of birth is an actual date of birth and it doesn't say 2020 on it. A lot of times people get in a hurry and they tend to put the current date versus their birth date, and make sure that they're signed. Like I said, especially for the November election, there will be a lot of new registrations. So just make sure, if we are still going paper in November, just make sure you can read it. I know it's busy, but keep in mind that we're going to be processing anywhere to 4,000 to 6,000 of these in an election. And if we can't read it, that makes our jobs that much more time consuming, where it may take you an extra minute to confirm that you have all the right information, that you can read it. It will take me a lot of phone calls and deciphering, and a lot of times, a lot of guesswork. Approved photo IDs. If you have a new registrant, these are the proper photo IDs that they are listed. A driver's license or state ID permit with it, that it can be expired, as long as it has a picture with the address that they are voting at. U.S. passport, U.S. military veterans ID, tribal ID with name and signature and photo, and Minnesota high school, university, or college ID. The key with the driver's license is that if it can be, a driver's license can be from any state. This is just for the photo ID requirements. So basically the photo ID portion of it is just to confirm that the person in front of you is the person that's voting. With that photo ID, you're going to have a paper version or paper proof that their residence is in the county. So approved bills, accounts, and statements are utility bills, any kind of utility, cable, phone, electric. Now, a lot of people are paperless, go paperless in this generation. So this bill can be produced on a phone. You just need to see that it has their name and the current address and their voting. It can be a banking or credit card, a rent or mortgage payment or lease, current student fee statement. And just keep in mind, the only restriction on this paper basically is that it has the name, the address what they're voting at, and that it's issued within the last 30 days. I kind of went over a little bit about late registration. So the 21-day mark, if this is what kind of a sample of what the letter would look like, it can be used as the proof of voter registrations. Previous registrations, if you moved within the same polling place, like if you moved a building over, apartments, over, or if you moved out in the rural areas, if you lived in the same township, as long as you are in the same polling precinct, that counts as your paper proof. Find your voter's name on the roster and copy their voter ID number over to the section at the bottom of the registration application. If they, on the right side, if you looked at the vouching, on the right side there's like a barcode, and right above it is their voter ID. Now, in the city of Moorhead, we have a couple colleges, so their options are to bring their student ID, which will work as their photo ID. Again, that student ID must be Minnesota issued. So it has to be their current, like either Concordia or MSUM. They can use their college ID and a college list, and that college list will confirm their mailing address. So you have the college ID, which is your photo ID, and the list basically just gives you their mailing address to confirm that they've been put into that precinct they're voting in. Vouching, if all else fails, if we have, we don't get as many vouchers as we used to. Vouching is kind of more for people like a husband and wife move into an area and all the utilities are in one spouse or the other's names, like, or if you have a roommate situation where the responsible roommate pays for all the bills and everybody else just pays them. So they have the proof, they have their ID, and they can register to vote. As long as they have met the burden of proof on their own, they can turn around and vouch for another party in that same precinct. Yep, yes, I know my neighbor lives there and they meet the requirements. This also happens in a lot of areas where the elderly live. So if a neighbor brings their or someone brings their neighbor in and they don't have any identification or don't meet the requirement, a neighbor could vouch for that, yes, I know this is who she says she is, and that they are eligible to vote and have lived there. Vouching form is on the back of the voter registration form. Voter registered in the same precinct can sign up to attesting up to 8 new registrants. Most persons know they live in the precinct. Voucher can also register on election day except for the vouching. Again, you can't have someone confirm one part of it. Like the person that's vouching has to be able to either be a registered voter, so they've already are on the roster, or they have to be able to, on their own, meet the burden of proof to have their voter registration done. So you can't have a double vouch. You can't have, say, oh, well, we're husband and wife, and she's going to say I live there, and he's going to say I live there, but neither one of them are able to show proof of that completely on their own. Resident facility vouching. Resident facility vouching is a little bit different. I kind of gave a little bit of a spreadsheet here. They include nursing homes, veterans homes, developmentally disability care facilities, homeless shelters, and others. Staff and persons can vouch for their residents, can vouch for any number of voters in a facility. Employee must show proof of employment by one of the following. So they need to have either their staff ID number or a card, name a person on a list provided by the facility, and provide a statement of facility's letterhead signed and dated by the manager. So basically this is like if you have like senior rides, if a facility, like if one of the nursing homes decides to take their voters as one of their activities to go vote, a lot of elderly don't necessarily have photo identification, but a resident employee can vouch for them. Yes, they've been in the facility and have been there for 20 days, and they are who they say they are. Marking proof of residence. So if you have a new registrant, there's a piece at the bottom of the voter registration that looks similar to the example on the right. So in the first box, which we've kind of gone over, is if you have a Minnesota driver's license, a Minnesota receipt, or a tribal ID card that has the picture and current address, you would mark your ballot or your proof on that box. Now, if you have a driver's license that doesn't have the current address, or a passport, a tribal ID, or U.S. military or student ID, then if without the current information, current address. Then you're going to fall into the middle box. So then that was where you would need a photo ID. It could be any state driver's license, doesn't matter from what state, North Dakota, Alaska, Texas, doesn't matter. And then you would write down the number of the driver's license that you see. So write down North Dakota driver's license and the number. And then document type. So if you took a utility bill, a credit card statement, if you took a lease, some piece of paper that has been issued in 30 days, putting someone at that address, and all you need to do is write the type of information you took. I don't want credit card numbers, I don't want social security cards, I don't want anything like that. No numbers, just whatever you witnessed, the photo ID type you took, and the driver's license you took. If it is a Minnesota driver's license, is the only exception to numbers I want. The only reason I say that is because with handwriting, if you put in the driver's license number, I can verify that the information at the top is listed, or if the voter didn't use their driver's license number, it would be nice to have that information so I can make sure to put it in our system. Now, if they don't have a driver's license and proof, then the last category is kind of like the last resort category. We went over a few minutes ago on how vouching works, how your late registration, if a valid registration in the same precinct, because we've already verified their identity. So valid, if they moved, they still have to fill out a new voter registration, but their burden of proof is met if they're already on the roster. Student ID with college list, we kind of went over. And anything that you take as proof, please mark the ID number. Okay, so now we've gone through the ballot judge, so we've gone to the roster. So your greeter judge is going to give a pen to each voter, kind of control your flow, and then you're going to pass them to the registration and new registration roster judges. We've gone through and they've signed the roster, because once they are done registering to vote, they sign the back of the roster. And then once they've signed the roster, then you hand them a voter receipt. It's a little yellow piece of paper that is given to the voter. Make sure the voter takes their pen, and then they go to the ballot judge, and the ballot judge is the one that issues their precinct ballots. So the ballot judge is responsible to record the total number of ballots that are provided in packets to the polling location. They open and initial the supply of packets and verify quantity. So like if you have a packet and you open it and it says there's 50 ballots in that packet, but when you open them and count them, you only get 49, make sure that we're aware of that, so that at the end of the night, if we're off a ballot, we know why. Or if you have 51, any kind of discrepancy, make sure it's marked in the incident log. Open an initial supply of packets and verify quantities. 2 judges initial each ballot on the top right corner, and get out your supply of secrecy envelopes. A voter will come over, they'll have their voter receipt. You will use and demonstrate how to fill in the oval on the voter receipt so they can see it. The ballot judge is going to take the voter receipt and hand them a ballot with a secrecy envelope. Those voter receipts are a backup on how to keep track of how many voters have come through and received ballots from that precinct. No one should get a ballot without a voter receipt. If you have someone that comes up and bypasses the roster lines, comes to you without a voter receipt, you cannot give them a ballot. A ballot should never be issued unless a voter receipt is retained. Ballot judge additional duties: counts and tracks packs of ballots, collects registered voter receipts. Again, make sure that no ballot is given without a voter receipt. Issues ballots. Be sure to give correct ballot in split school district. This is really big for the November election out in the county and in the city of Dilworth. If you have multiple school districts in your polling location, make sure that you mark the school district on the bottom, or make sure that you're making sure you're giving them the correct ballot. If you don't, your numbers are going to be off at the end of the night, or you just don't want someone to be voting for things that they shouldn't be. Spoiled ballots, if someone goes, especially this happens a lot in the primary, you give them a primary ballot and you explain to them, you can only vote straight party lines in the partisan primary in August. So they either have to vote all Republican, all Democrat, and you can only vote for a certain amount of people. But if someone like votes for one Democrat, one Republican, their ballot will get rejected because they once it gets to the ballot box. And so the ballot judge will ask them, you know, do you want to correct it, or do you want to just keep going and putting the ballot through? What will happen is the races that are crossed over, their ballot won't be counted for. So if they choose to wanting to do it again, or if they make a mistake on their ballot and they want a new one, you can take that ballot, write spoiled across it, and put it in your spoiled ballot envelope and issue a new ballot for that voter. Found ballot, if you find a ballot that is abandoned somewhere, like if someone takes the ballot and they like, oh, this is all it is, or if they choose that they don't have enough time to finish voting and for some reason or get called away and they leave their ballot on the table, you would go ahead and you would find and you'd put mark found in booth on the ballot and put in the spoiled envelope. And then record that in the incident log, because that way, because you're going to have an extra voter receipt and an extra signature more likely, you want to make sure that that's marked in the incident log, and so that at the end of the night, if they're off, if they're short on ballots, they'll know why, because you found that extra one and it's in the spoiled envelope. Demonstration judge. Again, the ballot judge and the demonstration judge are most likely going to be the one and the same person. So they're going to take that voter receipt, and there's like little ovals on there that you're just basically, your whole point is to make sure that you just have them, show them, fill in the oval, similar target next to the candidate or question on the ballot. Place your ballot in the secrecy cover, insert your ballot into the ballot counter. You can get a replacement ballot if you make a mistake. And remember, in August, it's a primary, so they do need to vote straight party lines. In the primary, there are no write-in votes. On partisan races, only vote for candidates from one political party. If you vote candidates for both political parties, your votes will not be counted. Ballot questions, I don't know at this point. I don't believe there are any ballot questions that are going to be on the election ballots this year. If there are, the only other thing is I want to let you know is do not interpret a ballot question for any voter. So basically, you can read the question as it says on there, but I would don't say, oh, I think this is what this means, because if it's a pass or fail, it could impact the outcome. Assistant by election judges do not influence how a person votes. Direct questions to a voter, not the ones around them. So like if you have a voter that comes in with a helper, make sure you're talking to the voter, not the helper. Don't bypass the voter like they're not, acknowledge them, and that is who your client is. Help only as much as requested. 2 election judges of different major parties may mark a ballot according to voters' directions. If you are actually helping a voter mark the ballot, make sure that there are 2 of you helping in that process. Do not reveal how that person voted. I always have made the comment in the past, we've had extremes of examples for some of these situations. Help only as much as requested. If you have someone that is struggling, do not rush in. Give them a minute to get their bearings, take a breath. If you become over helpful, people become offended. So if someone, obviously if they request help, by all means help them. But if someone is struggling, just give them a minute, let them take a breath. If they request your help, by all means help them. But unless they request your help, please don't be over helpful. It's obvious in most people that not to reveal how a person votes in a polling location. With the 6-foot boundary, we don't have it as often as, but keep in mind that if you do notice how someone is voting, do not comment to them or do not comment to anyone in that polling location and have a conversation. Oh, I can't believe so-and-so voted this way, or did you see that guy, how he voted? You know, those things have actually happened in polling locations in the past. And let me tell you, I will get a phone call. So if something like that does happen, if someone doesn't notice that happening, make sure that those are incidents that are put in their incident logs. I stated it in the PMP, if you guys went through PMP training, whatever happens in a polling location is confidential. You're there to do a job, people are there to, and they have the right to privacy. So just keep that in mind. Interpreters and assistance from others. Voters may choose someone other than election judges for help. Helper can be anyone except for an agent of an employer, their union, or a candidate. Now, there is some legislation that is going through that a candidate potentially could be the helper, voting for that voter. Assist can help unlimited number of voters in all aspects of voting process except for marking ballots. An assistant can only mark ballots for up to 3 voters per election. That has also changed. They can help for an unlimited amount. That's new legislation as well. Curbside voting. I'm not sure how much that's going to be now with COVID-19. It could become kind of the new norm, but we are going to be a little bit shorter on the election judge staff, so we're going to have the curbside voting available, but we're not sure how much we're going to promote it. So as it is, curbside voting is available. Voters are unable to enter the polling place from a vehicle. So if you have someone with unable to walk or health issues, if they are unable to come into the polling location, and then they choose to do that. Most people in that circumstance usually votes absentee, so we get quite a few curbside voting absentee, but I don't know how much out in the polling place you'll get. 2 election judges from 2 different political parties will need to bring the materials to the vehicle. Okay, so you bring out, there is a curbside voting paper that you'll bring out, which acts as their signature on a roster. Do not bring out the actual roster outside. You can bring out the greeter list to confirm. So if you're going out to a curbside, I would recommend that you take the curbside voter, the greeter list to confirm, because everybody that's on the roster is in the greeter list. So you take the greeter list out. If they're on the greeter list, have them sign the roster page. Take the roster curbside voting page back in, drop that off, get the voter receipt and the ballot, take the ballot back out to the voter, hand them the voter receipt, explain to them how to fill in the oval, give them the ballot, they vote the ballot, both judges bring the ballot back into the polling location and put it in the ballot box. Monitor, ballot judge counter. So the ballot counter judge is basically the last line of defense. So they're going to monitor operations of the ballot counter, distribute I voted stickers. We're going to have voting sticker stations this year so that there is less contact. Don't put it on anybody's purse or belongings. Those are just to be distributed through the station. They also will have some kind of box if people want to leave their pens that can be put next to the I voted sticker station. Only judges can approach within 6 feet of the box, and that is just to monitor equipment. Again, if you're entering the ballot 6-foot ballot box area, make sure that you are not commenting or being overly nosy, I guess the best way to put it politely. Just go in there at their request and see if you can help with the equipment problem. Most likely, especially in the August election, if you're entering that 6-foot barrier, it's because someone's crossed party lines. If they have a ballot question, again, only enter that 6-foot space if they ask you to. If it's been a while and like you're getting a backup because this person just keeps trying over and over again, just ask them, would you like some assistance? And if they say yes, then go in and help them. But don't rush in there as soon as the thing beeps. Do not examine the voter's ballot unless voter asks you to. If it's beeping and they can't figure out what's going on, if they want you to look at it, do not comment, but you can, just say it looks like you voted, cross party lines? Would you like to process it as is and those races won't be counted? Or would you like a new ballot to revote? Listen for warning signs of error and offer assistance if requested. Ballot marking device and ballot counting machine. Again, these are for the AutoMark and for the ballot, the M200s. Make sure the station for the AutoMark is wheelchair accessible and is private. It's a voting booth. You want to test the AutoMark to see if it works. We always recommend at least one judge if they're to vote in that precinct. Use the AutoMark. If you don't have someone that are available to vote, you can always test it with a regular ballot and vote it, and then just spoil the ballot when you're done. Compare paper ballots to offices and candidates displayed on screen. Verify boxes empty before it begins. You won't have to worry too much about the candidates on the display of the screen, but verify your box, your M200 box is empty. Make sure there's nothing in there before you start. So when you set up the machine, just go ahead and check, make sure that there's no ballots left over from testing or that type of thing. Lock or seal your M200 machine, locate your 6-foot boundary, and follow your head judge instructions to print the zero tape office and candidates. As far as when you're setting up your polling location, and head judges will kind of go through this as well, I always recommend that the machines be your number one priority when you get there. Because if something is wrong with your machines, it gives us time from the county or from the city staff to come and make sure that we can get that operational before you have to open. So when you get there at 6:30 in the morning, the first thing you should be doing is to make sure that your ballot counter is set up, everything is, your 6-foot boundary is around, make sure your ballot box is empty, make sure you're able to turn it on, make sure you have all your right sticks and cards, and make sure that your screen pops up to the right screen. Make sure all of that is good before you worry about taking out all your supply box. 2 of your judges could be working on your ballot machine, and then the rest of you should be able to just be able to get your station set up. But your ballot counter judge and maybe your ballot judge and your ballot counter judge should be, your number one priority should be making sure that that machine is up and running. Errors. Machine will beep and return the ballot if a voter has voted for more candidates than allowed for an office, voted for candidates from more than one party in a primary. Again, so if they cross party lines, voter may get a new ballot if you can, or they can override the error and that race will not be counted. If they vote for more than one candidate, that happens a lot in like school districts, races where you have to vote for 2 candidates or 4 candidates. Sometimes they'll vote for too many or too little. If they only have one person that they want to vote for and they only choose to vote 1 instead of 4, the machine will beep. But if their intent is that's all they want to vote for, if you hit the enter button, it will process that and it'll only process what they voted for. So this will not happen for the primary election, but it could potentially happen in November. In fact, it probably will happen in November. You have to have 2 ballot judges, or 2 judges of different political parties, so like a head judge and your ballot judge. You're going to straighten out your ballots and empty all the ballots out of that machine. If removing ballots, keep the ballots with the write-ins in a separate container. I would just put them into a transfer case and keep them in a secure area. Record the time and the initials of the judges and put that over the seal of the ballot box. With the M200s, the voter, like the write-in ballots, those will all come up on your slip, so you do not need to separate out your write-ins into a different box. You're just going to make sure that if you can either straighten them if it's not a full box, if you don't have enough judges at the time, to empty it. But if you know it's getting full, I would just take 2 judges and remove them, put them in a ballot box, seal it, have both judges initial it, and then put them in a secured area. And then again, record the time and the initials and the seal. if counter stops working, there is an auxiliary slot that I'm assuming Nancy went over with the machines. If for some reason, if your machine goes down, open your auxiliary slot, have them put them in the auxiliary slot until the machine is working again. Contact our office or the clerk, and voting continues without interruption, because you don't want to turn anybody away. You don't want to have anybody wait unnecessarily long. Just have them put them in the auxiliary slot. And when the counter is working again, 2 judges can feed the ballots into the auxiliary slot, or take them out of the auxiliary slot. Again, it'd be just like if you were removing them to pack away, take them out of the auxiliary slot, and then they would feed them into the ballot counter. Now, if it's super busy, which it might be, those ballots can be done later. You can just start the machine and then just shut the auxiliary slot and then process them at a slow period or at the end of the night. Ballot marking device. This is the AutoMark. Provides privacy and independence to voters who cannot or choose not to vote using a pen. Displays a ballot in a large print, high contrast background. Can read a ballot to the voter through headphones. Allow voter to select candidates with keypad, touchscreen, if applicable, or SIP and puff device. Try using it to mark your own ballot and familiarize the system. Now, the buttons all have Braille on the outside of them as well, like so they can kind of feel. So it's for the machine actually works really well, so more people can become independent, have higher needs. Servicing voters who have a disability. Help every voter participate equally in the process. Election judges cannot challenge the eligibility of a voter or account the person perceived as cognitive capability. So unless a court has decided that they are unable to vote, they are eligible to vote. It is not up to anyone else but the court to make that call. Like if you have dementia patients and then someone says, well, they shouldn't be allowed to vote, it's not up to us to determine if they're eligible to vote. If they're there to vote and they meet the requirements as residency to vote, they're, in our eyes, eligible to vote and are allowed to vote. Voters who are blind or have low vision, offer your arm to them to hold and paint a verbal picture of the pathway. Tell a voter when you're leaving or when another judge will be taking over to assist them. If your roster judge, have a signature guide to make it easier for a blind voter to sign the roster. Have a magnifying glass at the roster table for voters with partial vision. Most of them will already have a helper, but again, only do that if they request your help. Voters who are deaf, speak calmly and directly to the voter. Avoid impulse to talk louder to people with hearing impairments. Pointing to appropriate objects or using visual aids can be very helpful. Sometimes written communication works best. Okay, so opening the polls. Make sure polling places and voting must begin on time if you're having some kind of malfunction in your polling location. The biggest key is if your machine's not working, make sure your auxiliary slot is open. If your roster stations aren't completely set up, at least make sure that someone can come in, sign the roster, vote. You can set up around people, but make sure that your polling location is always open at the right time. Like I said, use auxiliary slot, ballot boxes. If something's not working properly, don't wait for us to come fix it up before you open the poll. Open your poll and get the voters through. Persons allowed in near the polling places. Again, I don't believe this will happen much in August, but November is a totally different situation. Be aware that there are going to be people around to get information. Only election judges, people directly engaging in voting, and authorized persons can be present. You don't want a lot of loiterers. Challengers may not challenge a party choice. Important to keep distance from the roster and ballot areas. May not make a list of people who are voting. And voter complaints, state election law complaint form. There are going to be forms that the head judges will have. If the voter has a complaint, then that form will be issued to them. Authorized persons, persons helping a voter, children accompanying a voter, vouchers, observers within written authorization from the Secretary of State, County Auditor, or Clerk. If there is an observer that has been approved through those channels, then that information will be given to you at the beginning of your day So it's not something that all of a sudden they're just going to show up and you'll have no idea. Peace officers, if a judge requests their presence to keep order, if we have a polling location that has some kind of disturbance in it, peace officers might be there. Challengers, appointed in writing by a political party or nonpartisan candidate. Again, challengers in that category, you will be notified if because they have to submit something to the county auditor or to the Secretary of State. Teachers in elementary and high school students, if participating in a mock election, they have to be authorized by the Secretary of State, and that information again will be given to that polling location. Persons making a written complaint, the media, people conducting exit polls can be there on the premises, but not in the room where the voting actually occurs. Media. So media will not necessarily be, again, in the August election, but a lot of potential to be in November. They must provide photo ID to the head judge and either with their media credentials or written statement of local election office. If you have media there, make sure that you let the county auditor's office know. And if we issue a written statement, we will let you know that they are coming to your area. Media, however, cannot approach within a 6 foot of someone voting, converse with a voter while in the polling location, make a list of persons voting or not voting, or interfere with the voting process at all. If they do, make sure that you notify them, let them know that they cannot do that behavior. Have your head judge make sure that they're abiding by the rules. If they continue to cause trouble in your polling location, then just go ahead and call our office, and we'll let them know that they need to leave. As far as the other caution I have is media are there to get information. It's their job. So they are going to try and start conversations with head judges, regular election judges. So just make sure that you don't engage. So you're there to do a job, they're there to do a job. They're just fishing for information. So even if you are having a conversation that is totally unrelated to the election, it's voter perception. If they think you're talking to the media, people might interpret that differently than you just swapping out recipes. There's a time and a place for those behaviors, and it's not in the polling place. So just keep in mind that if you're dealing with the media, that they're there and that they're respecting the privacy of the voters, and they're respecting the privacy of the process as well. Prohibition on campaigning. No campaigning or lingering within 100 feet of the building. If the polling place is in a public property, campaigning not allowed anywhere on the property, even 100 feet. That does include parking lots. Does not apply to adjacent private property. Ask voter to either cover up or remove political material while in the polling place. If they refuse, they can still vote, but note their record, record their name and how you handled the event. So if they come in and they have a hat on, ask them to remove the hat, or if they have a button on, to remove the button. If they have on a political party shirt in November, which will most likely be when that would occur, just have them cover up that information, like the coat, or if they have a bracelet on, which was kind of a big one in 2018, have them remove any paraphernalia you can, and just let them know. And then if they refuse, just kind of note in the incident log their name and how you handled the event. Closing of voting. Voters in line at 8 p.m. will be allowed to vote. Polling places open to the public after all voting is finished. So if someone wants to review how you are working the process, they can do that. If that does happen, please notify our office that you have what's going on in that polling location. Members of the public observing closing do not have to provide letter like the challengers. They just want to see how you are working or see how the process works. You need to process your ballots and complete a summary statement. The summary statement there, we're going to be putting out on the web some papers, like what you're going to see in your election day folder that go out to the townships. On there will be a copy of a summary statement and the instructions on how to fill one out. But by any means, if you have any questions, let us know. Closing of polls, you're going to pack up supplies and unused ballots and bring all your AutoMark cards and your MS-200s, your rosters of paper, which for the primary, they all will be, All used ballots packed and sealed in transfer cases. Now, all used ballots, anything that's unused, it doesn't have to be in a transfer case. So those don't have to come up to the counter. All paper election day registrations. Again, those will be all for August at this point, means that we're going back to paper. Seal all used ballots, ensure ballot boxes empty. Deliver all election materials and results to your local office, which is the Clay County Auditor's Office in the courthouse, second floor. Incident log. I say this every year. So incident logs are basically my information from what happens out in your polling place. Now, I sit in an office at the, in the county auditor's office, and I am not on your front lines. I don't know what happens on your front lines. So your incident logs are everything that's going on. So if it's slow, or if some incident was handled, or if someone complains to you, my thought process is if someone complains to you and takes the time out to inform you that something that they think it should change in your polling place, or if there's something that has bothered them about something that they didn't like how the voting booths were put up, or if they didn't like that the flag wasn't at the right location or not in the, or if someone said something to them, a voting judge, or how something was handled. If someone takes the time out to inform you, most likely they'll take the time out to call me. So what happens is someone comes in and they make a comment to you, which may even seem fleeting to you, like it's only like a passing comment to you, but then they go home and then they stew overnight, all night long, about what happened, and then if they don't feel that the resolution was brought to them or done right, or if there was no resolution or no comment to them, they're going to come back and call me the next day and tell me their version of what happened. So your incident log is basically what tells me how a certain circumstance, what happened. I always say I'd rather have more information on the incident log than less. So anything that happens, if your ballots are off, mark it on the incident log. If you have someone come into the voter with an issue, mark it in the incident log. If you have someone that, a challenge voter, like a felony especially, mark it in the incident log. If you have a problem with an election judge doing something, or if you have a supply issue that needs to be addressed, like if you didn't get enough pens, or if something was missing that you think that you need, or anything that happens in the polling location that either will make your process better or any comments that will make the voters' process better, those all need to be on those incident logs, because if I don't know, you're never going to remember to tell me. So just put them on the incident log, and that way we can go through them and see if we can make things better. Resources. On election day, you have the election guide, other election judges in the precinct, you have head judges, clerks, city or township, and county auditor. Training, you're going to have an election guide that will be out, accessible by link, election judge workbook, election judge training DVD. There is a DVD, and then this PowerPoint, and head judge will be out there, machines will be out there, and we're going to do election day forms will be out there as well in the near future. Additional election resources, Secretary of State website, voter information portal, sample ballots, voter registration application, AB applications and tracking. If you have any questions, here is our main line number. If you have any questions after you've gone through it, you can go ahead and go through. There is going to be a completion form required once you've completed your training that has to be issued and given to your township or city clerk. And then those clerks will then forward those on to the auditor's office, basically stating that you went through 2 hours of training, so that we can make sure that we can track the ones that have completed the training videos.
Welcome to the election judge training. My portion of the training is the election machines, which we have here. I'll go through how to set them up and the process that you'll need to go through. You'll each have one of these slips that walks through basically what I'm going to tell you. So it's very simple, and you should have no troubles. First of all, this is we call this the garage. This is the part that holds the ballots. It comes with two separate cabinets in the front. This cabinet down here is the one that collects the ballots. Make sure there are no ballots in there before you start. Also, we have the second cabinet. This is the auxiliary compartment. If for any reason your power goes down or you're unable to use regular folding, putting it in the ballots, you would open this up here. Fold this tab down so the ballots can pass through. You'll feed the ballots into there until the time which you can use your machine again. The garage is where your machine will actually go into. There is a plug here in which goes into the back of the machine. The back of this has your plug-in cord. You take the plug-in cord out, just leave this door open throughout the election. It also has two little pedals on the front so you can lock the machine in place so it's not going to run off on you. The other part should be called this the car, which goes into the garage. This is actually where the ballots get fed into and everything gets counted. It slides onto this track. And then you plug this into the back of the car. Personally, I think this is the hardest part of the whole thing, is getting this thing plugged in. Make sure when you push the car back that you don't block this area with the cord, because otherwise the ballots will get hung up there. Then once that is in, you can put this up, and this locks the machine into there. There is a lock right in the front here that will put your lock in to make it stay up. Okay, so now we're ready to open up the car. When you open this up, it'll take a little bit of time to load up. But it should come up to this configuration right here that you see. There's 3 green checks. It says the voting device is ready, election definition is found, which is the little stick that goes in there, and it's plugged into electricity. If any of those are unchecked, just give us a call. Unless it's the electricity one, you can figure that one out. Give us a call and we'll get it figured out for you. Your paper is in the very front here. When you have to replace the paper, it's just a drop-in thing, and it'll process itself through. This machine will also run you have to have your 0 tape. The first tape that it runs is some kind of configuration tape. You don't have to run that if you don't want it. You can say stop printing, but otherwise you can just let it go. The paper should stay attached to this machine throughout the whole thing. You don't pull that paper off until the end of the night after you print your results. Another thing is to check when you open this up that it says public count 0. Here's our 3 checks. And so the next thing you do, and something else I'll tell you. Down here it says protected count. That is how many times ballots have gone through this particular machine, and they just keep track of that to determine, it has to be replaced or whatever. So you got your 3 checks. We're going to go to open polls. it's ballot status report, you don't need to run that. Now it's running our zero tape that we do have to have. You should check it just to make sure everything reads 0 on it. I just happened to pick a Barnesville, and they have 3 different wards in there, so it did run the 3 separate zero tapes. Okay, now it says we're ready for voting. You go to voting mode. Please insert your ballot. You run your ballots through. At the end of the night, when you're done, you will open up this compartment that has a seal on it. Break the seal. Might have to cut that. And there's a button in here that says close polls. So you just go ahead and hit the close poll button. It says you've chosen to close the polls. Do you want to close it? Or do you want to continue voting? You won't do that, you'll be closing. So now it's gonna, that's a ballot status. Again, we don't need that. Voting results report. Let this thing run until it's done. And these are the tapes that the judges are supposed to sign. It also gives you the numbers that you can transfer onto your summary statement. Just to save paper, I'm gonna cancel printing. Okay, device has been successfully closed. You go ahead and press finish, and the machine downloads, and you are done. Make sure you get your ballots out of the bottom. Make sure you don't take your card out of here till the red power button is completely off. It'll take just a little bit of time. If you take it out ahead of time, you might lose some data. This has to come back to us. The backup has to come back to us. You are done. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, call the auditor's office, 218-299-5006, or City of Moorhead, 218-299-5304. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the head judge training. What are the head judge duties? The head judge assigns election judges to specific tasks, gives direction as needed on election day, picks up election materials before the election, completes the election returns and other forms, closes the polling place, and returns election materials. The head judge is truly the lead official at the polling place. We as staff rely on the head judges to supervise the election judges, helping to resolve issues and questions that may come in, including people making written complaints, challengers, challenged voters, curbside voters, media representatives, disorderly conduct, and persons campaigning or wearing campaign materials. We will go over some of the things that can happen during election day. While we can't touch on every single incident that may happen, that is why staff is here to help you out. If a person is making a written complaint, the complaint must be made using the HAVA elections complaint form found in your election day supplies. Upon request, you should provide that form to the voter. They can complete the form at the precinct, or they may take it with them. Election judges are authorized to sign as a notary on the form. Please be aware that signing the form as an election judge does not indicate agreement. Make a note in the incident log with details of the event. Challengers in the polling place. Only one challenger per major party may be appointed per polling place. All challenger appointments must be made in writing, and a challenger must present written appointment to the head judge, prove residency in Minnesota, not the precinct, and challenge the eligibility of the voter. based on personal knowledge. So, a challenger must make a challenge in writing, complete the oath of challenge to voters' eligibility for each challenge. A challenger may not speak to voters, speak to election judges other than to indicate the challenge, handle or inspect any election materials, or be disruptive. A challenger may not make lists of who voted and did not vote. They cannot take pictures within the polling place. They cannot go within 6 feet of the ballot counter, nor can they attempt to influence voting. Election judges have the right to eject a challenger from the polling place for violating these provisions, after being informed not to do so. Things to remember. Please remember to contact the election officials to notify that a challenger is present, and always record all events in the incident log. This allows the county to know what happened during the event. Common roster notations. You will see these as notations on the roster. If there is an AB, that means absentee ballot, which means the voter has already cast an absentee ballot and cannot vote again in person. If it says CID, they must show Election Day registration documentation. Challenged for postal return, where they will need to show proof of their current address. Challenged, voted out of precinct. Challenged for a felony. Challenged for guardianship. If you see any of these notations and you do not know what to do, please feel free to contact one of the staff or the county during the election. This is an example of what you will see on the voter signature line showing the challenge of each of those items. If you have a challenged voter, have the voter affirm the oath, question the voter to determine their eligibility to vote. If the voter's answers indicate that the voter is eligible, the voter may proceed to sign the roster and vote. If a voter refuses to answer questions, they are not eligible, or they refuse to sign the roster, print on the roster that they have refused oath or not eligible. Again, always remember to make those notations in the incident log as appropriate. Have the challenger complete the oath of challenge and voter's eligibility form. Have the voter affirm the voting oath. Question them regarding the reason for the challenge. If the voter's answer indicate that the voter is eligible, they may proceed and sign the roster and vote. If a voter refuses to answer the questions, is not eligible, or refuses to sign the roster, again, write print refused oath or not eligible on the roster. In-person challenges. The challenger cannot speak to voters. If a challenger persists with the challenge and the voter continues to say they are eligible to vote, have the voter verbally repeat the oath. You may inform the challenger that they may contact the county attorney to pursue the matter further. Make notations in the incident log as appropriate. Roster challenge procedure. Have the voter swear or affirm an oath. Ask the appropriate questions. If they are eligible, the voter can vote. Make a note in the incident log. Curbside voting. Many times you will have someone that is unable to come into the voting area. What this does is it provides additional accommodation at polling sites. Remember these things. 2 election judges from different political parties must assist the voter. You will go out to the curbside, ask for the voter's name, check the greeter list for registration, and the voter will complete the certificate of registered voter. They will also complete the voter registration application form if needed. Exchange the forms for a voter receipt. You will print curbside on the roster, noting that they did curbside voting. Hand over the voter receipt to obtain a ballot. Bring the ballot back to the voter in the vehicle. The voter will complete the ballot, and you can provide assistance as requested. Place the completed ballot into the ballot box. Media representatives. Many times we will have the media come to polling places to get snippets or video or talk to people in regards to how the process is working that day. As a head judge, it is your responsibility to engage with the media representatives and remind them of what the rules and regulations are. Media representatives need to present a photo ID and credentials. If they do not have that, they must bring it prior to them being able to take photos or video. They must also remain 6 feet from any voter. They cannot converse with voters in the polling location, and do not make a list of those voting or not voting. Prohibited conduct at voting locations. People engaging in prohibited conduct must be asked to leave, whether that is a disorderly person, an intoxicated person, someone who is smoking, or someone just lingering outside within the building. If it's a low-level incident happening, contact the election official. You can always contact the staff or county on how to adjust what to do. If it is high-level, please immediately contact law enforcement and record all events in the incident log. Campaign material. Persons are prohibited from campaigning or displaying campaign materials at the polling sites. If someone comes in with it, please ask the individual to remove campaign material, whether it's a button, a hat, a shirt. If they refuse, explain that eligible voters will be allowed to vote, and the refusal will be recorded and referred to election officials. The incident log. We've talked a lot about the incident log throughout this process. Really what the incident log is a direct contact from each site to the county and other election officials. It's our way of knowing that something happened. Make sure to record any unusual events or problems in the precinct. If the ballot counter stops operating, if there was a disturbance that occurred in the polling place, if a voter is upset about something that happened in the polling place, or anything else that just is out of the ordinary, please mark it on your incident log. The incident log is a huge resource for the election officials after the fact. Remember to record the information about the incident, the time, how it was resolved, and include as much detail as possible in case further investigation becomes necessary. Thank you so much for joining us for this head judge training. If you have any other questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to the city clerk at 218-299-5304. Thanks so much for your help.